The Lost History. Hidden in DNA. The untold story of the Gullah Geechee people. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that a large part of your family's history has been erased. No photographs, no written records, no family tree stretching back hundreds of years. Just fragments of stories passed from one generation to the next. Now imagine discovering that the answers to those missing chapters may have been hidden inside you all along. Inside your DNA. This is the story of the Gullah Geechee people, a story of survival, a story of identity, and a story that proves history can survive even when everything else is taken away. But to understand this remarkable journey, we must travel back more than 400 years, back to the western coast of Africa. Long before the United States existed, West Africa was home to powerful kingdoms, thriving trade networks, skilled farmers, talented craftsmen, and rich cultural traditions. People spoke dozens of languages. They practiced unique customs. They built communities that had existed for generations. But beginning in the 1500s, one of history's darkest chapters began to unfold. European slave traders arrived along the African coast. Over the centuries, millions of Africans were captured, sold, and forced onto ships crossing the Atlantic Ocean. The journey became known as the Middle Passage. For many, it was a nightmare from which they would never return. Families were separated. Communities were destroyed. Entire generations disappeared from the lands they once called home. Yet even in the face of unimaginable hardship, something extraordinary survived. Culture. Many of those brought to North America eventually arrived in coastal regions of what are now South Carolina, Georgia, northern Florida, and nearby sea islands. These islands would become the foundation of one of the most unique cultures in American history, the Gullah Geechee people. But here's where the story becomes fascinating. Unlike many enslaved populations living closer to major cities, people on the sea islands often lived in relatively isolated communities. The surrounding waters created a natural barrier between the islands and the mainland. And that isolation had an unexpected consequence. It allowed traditions to survive. Language survived. Stories survived. Food traditions survived. Music survived. Memories survived. Generation after generation. As years passed, the Gullah Geechee people developed a culture unlike any other in the United States. Their language blended English with influences from multiple West African languages. Their cuisine reflected both African knowledge and local ingredients. Their storytelling traditions preserved lessons, wisdom, and ancestral memories. Their crafts and artistic expressions reflected centuries of cultural heritage. Visitors to the region often noticed something different, something unique, something deeply connected to the past. But despite their cultural richness, many questions remained unanswered. Where exactly had their ancestors come from? Which African regions had contributed most strongly to their heritage? How much of their culture could be traced back across the Atlantic Ocean? For decades, historians searched for answers. Researchers studied old shipping records, slave trade documents, plantation archives, census records, personal journals. Every clue revealed another piece of the puzzle. Yet some pieces were still missing. Then, science entered the picture. And everything began to change. In recent decades, advances in genetic research have transformed our understanding of human history. Scientists realized that DNA could reveal connections impossible to see through historical documents alone. Every person carries genetic information inherited from countless ancestors, generation after generation, century after century, like a biological archive written inside every cell. Researchers began examining the genetic ancestry of Gullah Geechee descendants. The results were remarkable. Studies found strong genetic connections between Gullah Geechee communities and multiple populations across West Africa. The findings supported historical evidence suggesting that many ancestors originated from regions involved in the transatlantic slave trade. For historians, these discoveries were significant. For descendants, they were deeply personal. Many people felt a stronger connection to parts of their history that had once seemed unreachable. But here's the truly amazing part. DNA did not replace history. Instead, it helped fill in missing chapters. Historical records told one part of the story. Cultural traditions told another. Genetic evidence added yet another layer. Together, they painted a more complete picture of the past. Yet the Gullah Geechee story is about far more than ancestry. It is about resilience. Think about it. For centuries, countless forces threatened